My nigga, Colin Kaepernick, GQ man of the year, yeah, with the party everywhere, girls everywhere, with the man of the year. Shout out to Colin Kaepernick, man. Full support from your boy, a humanitarian if you ask me, someone who's been for the people this whole time, standing by the people, speaking for the people, speaking against this systemic structure. I'm doing this video basically just to pay my homage and respect to somebody who's actually willing to take the time to be a social activist, to actually speak for people who don't even have a voice themselves, to actually go against this corrupt establishment in which most people are compliant to. And this video is on Stephen A. Smith, one of the best coons we got in sports, talking down on Kaepernick for not voting, as if voting was always the righteous measure for social activism. If you know, historically, the black vote has always been suppressed. We had efficacy tests where black folks who couldn't read or write because they weren't allotted to read or write had to take tests to be able to vote. And once we were efficient enough, once we had the ability to learn, they found measures to suppress our vote in other ways, i.e. convictions, i.e. not even counting fucking some votes in some states. So voting has never been the active measure for activism. If you want to ask Malcolm, if you want to ask Huey, if you even want to ask Martin Luther, if you want to ask Fred Hampton, if you want to ask real social activists, voting has never been the measure because voting is a measure of the system. The system is in place to keep the system intact. So voting will not be the reason why a revolution starts. But Stephen A. Coonan, you know he gonna support all that.
So when Colin Kaepernick said he has not and will not vote in this presidential election, it left many scratching their head as to how he can be socially conscious.
It's a contradiction because you guys are so programmed to thinking voting and doing whatever the system told you to do is an act of social activism. Voting is a measure of the system. The system is always and has always been racist, whether or not we voted or not. Democrats or Republicans have the same interests. So how is social activism even comparable to voting? They don't even align. The goal is to abolish the system in which voting is in, not to vote within the system that don't do shit. Malcolm X didn't vote, my favorite leader. He didn't vote. He said our vote was being manipulated, which it is. We vote Democrat every time, and Democrats have no interest in us.
Yet not vote. Kaepernick has previously expressed his displeasure with both candidates in the presidential election. Stephen A., did he betray
House
his
Negro.
cause?
He absolutely betrayed his cause. As far as I'm
How did he betray his cause? For one, his cause is social activism. For two, voting has never promoted social activism. Maybe integration, to use the black dollar, but not social activism, not equality, not oppression. When has voting ever stopped oppression? You just have this stigmatized definition of what it means to be a social activist. It's a contradiction to program people. You guys would have said Malcolm X was a contradiction because he didn't vote. He wanted to abolish the system. Now you got hyper coons like him saying Cap has no respect 10 months ago. He might have retracted it, but fuck it. I'm going back to this. GQ man of the year, nigga.
concerned, Colin Kaepernick is absolutely irrelevant. I don't want to see him again. I don't want to hear from him again. I don't want to hear a damn word about anything that he has to say.
Standing up for the white man. By white man, I don't mean white citizen. I mean the elite who control the structure.
About our nation, the issues that we have, racial injustices, needing change, etc., etc. He comes across as a flaming hypocrite. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not interested in a damn word that he has.
Who are you? You don't even speak on social activism. You don't speak on social injustice. You don't speak on anything. You speak on sports and the topics that they throw in your fucking face. These people, these elitists, these lobbyists who lobby for these politicians to place policies, they own your ESPN, they own your network. They tell you what to do. You're a puppet at the whim of their fucking voice. So you're nothing in comparison to what Colin Kaepernick is doing, who's speaking for some people. You speak for nobody.
To say, and quite frankly, I hope he goes away. He's lucky to be in the league right now.
I hope you go away. You lucky to be on the screen right now. Boy, push that tape line back up.
0-3 as a starter this year, only complete.
Don't mention his stats. Don't mention his numbers, please. You're talking about social activism. Why are you mentioning his number? Talking about he lucky to be in the NFL. The NFL is full of racist owners. So as a slave like you would say somebody's lucky to be enslaved. That's what House Negroes do. It's a privilege. Massa been good to you. Don't do Massa wrong. He been good to you. That's Stephen A. ass. He's a punk.
52% of his passes. He hasn't won a game. He doesn't look good at the quarterback spot. I don't care about Rust. I don't care about anything else. My days of rooting for him have come to an end. And
because he didn't vote. And he's going to say, the black people from long history fought our way to vote for you not to vote. That's the old stigmatized definition. But guess what? In the 60s, it made sense to fight, to vote. Because we actually thought voting meant something. We actually thought our voice would be heard. But once we passed efficacy tests, once we were able to vote after being destabilized, after being marginalized, after being prohibited to vote, once we were able to vote, we realized that voting never did shit. We start voting. We voted Obama. It never did shit. Just put a black face in there to take all the fucking brunt and the blame. We put a Hillary in there. It don't do shit for racism and social injustice. It still goes. Voting doesn't matter. I'm sorry to tell you, Americans, y'all love to call yourself American, even though American ain't nothing but a colonized fucking nation. Natives ain't here. We ain't no fucking Americans. You either got shipped here or you took this motherfucker. So you Americans love to say voting is the righteous act, but when has voting ever did anything aside from integration, which takes the black dollar?
Is why. You know something? Max Kellerman, as an African American in this country, you have to be sensitive.
Bam, you subscribe to African American, you've already been programmed in a certain manner. White people gave us African American. We apply on our job applications, we have to click one because that's how we will get perceived. If you click African American, they know that you're not a white American. They know that you're a different type of person. Even though I think humans are all of the same race, just variations. But once they type African American, they put these just to stigmatize you. And you've accepted that stigma. You're an African American. Man, it comes with marginalized rights. You don't get as much rights as the white man when you put African American, but you've accepted this reduced role.
That civil rights legislation was passed in the mid-60s. Okay? When we talk about the battles that have been fought.
Shout out to those fighting the battles. You don't fight the battles. So you need to shut the fuck up. Shout out to those fighting the battles. But as I said, in the 60s, it was a different fight, a different battle. Fighting in 2017 to get our vote, for everybody to go out there and vote, that's hypocrisy as far as social activism. Voting ain't gonna do shit for social activism. Never has, never will within that system.
Happened to people, what they've had to endure, the fact that folks ended up dying for the right for him to have the right to vote in this great
Told you he was gonna say that.
Country of ours. You have the opportunity to vote. And what exactly is voting all about? Ladies and gentlemen, you know what voting is? You know what? Do you not understand that that's the reason why we're the greatest country on the planet?
Oh my God, we're the greatest country on the planet now. He's doing all the rhetoric and all the bullshit that any westernized program motherfucker would say. We're the greatest country because we have the freedom to vote, though our vote has always been suppressed. If you look at convictions, once you're a convict, people who are subjugated to being convicts and having felons, they can't vote. They don't have rights. We have more people in prison than any nation ever. So we're the greatest nation, even though we put motherfuckers to jail. And people who own ESPN and all this shit have stocks in jail and NFL, and that's the people who's Coon Man's boss. The Coon's boss. Now he's whipping, he's lashing somebody who's against the system. That's all he's doing. He's being the perfect House Negro.
It's not just because of our wealth. It's not just because of the resources that we have available to us. It's because we have the power to change and manipulate the course, not just of our
to manipulate your ass, nigga.
Lives, but of generations to come because of the voice that we have through the vote.
The voice
change.
Through the vote? What voice through the vote has provoked change? Which voting measure really provoked significant change in looking at black people as equal people? Which constitutional right was it? Was it the 14th? In which your slavery is abolished, but if you go to prison, you still a fucking slave? Which vote was it?
If anybody in this country should appreciate that more,
It's the black
It is
man.
African Americans. Because that right.
We should be grateful for the vote that does nothing for us, right? You see how coons talk? Coons love what the white man will give us. By white man, I don't mean the white citizen watching this. I mean the elitists, the lobbyists, the owners. You hear the owners talk about their players like inmates and like shit. That's the white man I'm talking about. The ones who know they're deliberately being racist and they have coons passing off their racism in a subtle, distinct form. But I know what it is. This is just racism again. This is a black face being racist to black rights. Kaepernick is standing up for black rights. He's trying to put it down by saying, you should have voted. You have no credibility.
It wasn't something that was always bestowed upon us. You're Colin Kaepernick.
And women.
And women, absolutely, because women didn't have the right to vote. Absolutely.
Till long after African American men did, and think of how racist the country was back then.
That is correct. That is correct. So knowing all of this, and then having the audacity to kneel for the national anthem, talking about how you won't stop until there is change that take place, but ignore the very thing, the most poignant thing you can.
That's to you. To Huey Newton, voting ain't shit. To Malcolm, voting wasn't shit. To Fred Hampton, voting wasn't shit. To Marcus Garvey, voting wasn't shit. They all had an idea to nationalize themselves, separate from the structure. You're talking about complying within the structure. Typical House Negro. Hairline so far back, I don't even want to roast your physical features, man, but goddamn. Yeah, he's clowning, cooning. He's doing what the masses want him to do.
To help facilitate that change, and you play no active role in that.
So vote Hillary and it's Gucci. Now, I'm not opposed to voting state regulations and state policies. I go in and do that, but like I know that's not that's the passive measure of activism. The most passive measure is to go in the booth and vote for people who were already there before I even had a chance to choose them. They were already qualified through the structure, by the structure, before I even got to vote. Why we can't choose the ones to vote for? Think about that.
It's inexcusable. When President Obama was campaigning on behalf of Hillary Rodham Clinton, and he spoke at the Congressional Black Caucus, what he said was he would consider it a personal insult to his legacy if black folks did not activate themselves within this election. And Colin Kaepernick, after all,
I consider it an insult to black people worldwide to think that voting Obama is going to change racism. And Obama knows now that in 2017, he couldn't really do shit because policy after policy, he may have meant well. Shout out to Obama. I fuck with Obama more than Stephen A. Coon. But Obama probably knows now through policy, I can't even fucking change the perception of race. I can't change people from getting shot on the streets. They vote still don't mean shit. They vote and we still get shot and killed disproportionately. We still get targeted and imprisoned disproportionately. Stephen A. Coon, you's a fucking clown. GQ Man of the Year. Colin, not you.
All this noise that you made, even though you didn't intend to do so by offending our military servicemen and women.
Now he offended, look, he did all the Coon stigmatizing. He offended the military, even though Colin said 1 billion times it's not about the military. It's not about the flag. It's about the representation of the flag and America in its entirety and its injustice, particularly in the criminal justice system. But you want to say he disrespect the military. I understand some people who would take feelings towards it, but it's out of your ignorance. If you followed the stance, if you know the stance, he said it's nothing about the military. But let Stephen A. Coon tell it, it's all about the military.
And pointing out about how you wanted to bring attention to racial injustices. And
he did that. Didn't he do it? Did he bring attention to it? You guys sideswiped it. Talk about he's not a good quarterback. Talking about he's disrespecting the military. You guys sideswiped the convo. Keep the convo what it is. Why is he kneeling? You never really addressed it, punk.
Beyond this in this country to turn around and not to even take your behind to the polls to vote for a particular candidate, it is shameful. Absolutely shameful. Him of all people.
Shameful in the minds of a coon. Malcolm X would have hopped on this shit and said, Stephen A., you sound like a fucking coon. A fool. Came out the dead to call you a coon. If anybody watched Malcolm X's interviews, people like Stephen A. were getting attacked blatantly by Malcolm. because they tell you to comply with the system and do what the system tells. It's like in the 60s, they talk integration.